The St. George's Monastery is usually cited as Russia's oldest monastery. It stands in 5 kilometers south of Novgorod on the left bank of the Volkhov River near where it flows out of Lake Ilmen. The monastery used to be the most important in the medieval Novgorod Republic. It is part of the World Heritage Site named Historic Monuments of Novgorod and Surroundings. According to legend, the monastery of Wood was founded in 1030 by Yaroslav the Wise. The first historically reliable reference to it is from the early 12th century, when the stone building of the main church was started in 1119 by Prince of A.Savin Mstislavich of Novgorod and Psk of the Hegumen Kyriak, and built by the master Peter. By the first third of the 13th century, the hegumen had been raised to the status of an archimandrite. Archimandrite Savashi is mentioned asking the Novgorodians to bless his successor just before his death in 1226. This has led some scholars to argue that the archimandrites of the Yuriev Monastery were elected by the Vesh. Although there is very little evidence of this, in 1226 it appears that the Novgorodian elite approved the election of Savashi's successor, although whether the Vesh took part is unclear. A later Vesh held the archimandrite A.Savin overnight in the church of St. Nicholas on the marketplace in 1337. The chronicle does not say how the crisis was resolved, but the next year A.Savin was elevated to the archimandrite of St. George after the death of Lavronty. In 1342 he was sent to Kopori on a mission to secure Posadnik Fedor Danilovich, who was detained there. Russian monasteries at various times became guard houses for prisoners of state. Also, in 1345, the Church of St. George was renovated and new lead added to the roof under the direction of archimandrite A.Savin. The archimandrites of the Yuriev Monastery were often called archimandrite of Novgorod, as in 1270, when Varlam, hegumen of St. George's and archimandrite of Novgorod, died. A listing of the archimandrites of Novgorod is included in the back of the Novgorodian First Chronicle. In fact, the archimandrites of the Yuriev Monastery were, for several centuries, the only archimandrites in the Novgorodian land, and thus they were, in a manner of speaking, the archimandrites of Novgorod. Some scholars argue their role in the Novgorodian church administration was more formal than that, though, and they were the deputy to the archbishops of Novgorod, or else they headed all the monasteries in the Novgorodian land. This, however, remains uncertain. Archimandrite Sava was buried in the Antoniev Monastery, and several archimandrites built churches in other monasteries, perhaps indicating the power or influence over all the city-states monasteries. Archbishop Spiridon was a monk and deacon at the monastery before he was elected Archbishop of Novgorod. Archbishop Moisey was archimandrite of the Yuriev Monastery before being elected Archbishop, and Archbishop Feoktist was, according to some sources, buried at the Yuriev Monastery, but other sources give another monastery, the Monastery of the Annunciation, as his place of burial. Prince Dmitry Shmayarka was also allegedly buried there. The monastery played the role of Novgorodian prince's burial place. In 1198, two sons of Yaroslav the Wise, Izyaslav of Luki and Rostislav, are buried in the Church of St. George. In 1233, the elder brother of great Prince Alexander Nevsky called, and in 11 years, in 1244, the mother called found the last resting in the church. Almost 200 years afterwards, when Swedish intervents had unearthed graves looking for Luka while invading the monastery during the Ingran War, the remains of Prince Theodore were found imperishable. They put him out of grave and stand him leaned at wall. He was like alive. As the result, the great Prince Theodore was canonized in Novgorod and is the local saint. The monastery was an important source for historical information on medieval Novgorod, as part of the Novgorod First Chronicle was compiled in the monastery. The Church of St. George is one of the largest in Novgorod and its immediate environs. It is a tall white stone church 85 feet long by 75 feet wide with 3 silver domes, which is somewhat unusual for Russian churches which usually have 5. Some remnants of the medieval frescoes remain, but most of the church was refrescoes in 1902. Among the frescoes is a large Christ Pantocrator in the main dome, a full-length portrait of Novgorodian Archbishop Feoktist, and another full-length portrait of Prince Vsevolod Mstislavich on the southwestern pier. The monastery also has the Church of the Exaltation of the Cross in the northeastern corner of the monastery, with 5 blue domes and gold stars on it, built in the 18th century. The gateway into the monastery is crowned by a tall gold dome tower which is visible from the city center, including the Novgorod Kremlin 2 miles to the north. The monastery was ravaged during the Soviet rule. 5 of its 6 churches were destroyed by 1928. The monastery was closed in 1929. During the World War II, the buildings were occupied by the German and Spanish armed forces, and were seriously damaged. In 1991 the monastery was returned to the Russian Orthodox Church, and parts of it have been renovated since then. However, the western part, including a church there, are still in ruins. Some of the icons looted from the monastery by Ivan the Terrible